The Radio Wammo Breakfast.
The voice of the creative economy.
With Vincent Heeringa.
Indeed, from Good Magazine today, actually. Vincent, good morning.
Oh, good morning, Memo.
That's
That's the strangest song. That album is really good, but that title track...
It's like it's like on the pony going for a ride.
Yeah, I don't get it.
No.
He's such a good songwriter, though.
Yeah.
It's an aberration, and why he chose that as his title track. You must ask him that sometime.
Yeah.
Did you get him
Why?
on the show?
I had him on the show previously, and of course he's going to be back in the Flamo Pretties, who are reforming for summer.
Right.
Yeah.
Where are they playing?
They're playing at the in Napier, the vineyard there, and Peg Bay in North Canterbury as well in January.
Excellent.
Yeah. But today, Vincent, we're talking about how the green economy can help the poor.
Yeah, well, we've talked before about how through the recession, particularly in the UK and the US, they have invested in things like solar energy and green projects to help stimulate economic recovery. And there's been quite a lot of talk about the new Green Deal, or the Green New Deal, which was a riff on the 1930s New Deal policies at the government. And so Obama had been quite vociferous in chasing a few of these things. Probably the biggest thing has been the investment in clean tech.
Yeah.
But a new report by the UN Environmental Agency, or the UN Environmental Program, has highlighted how investments in environment actually can have a really dramatic effect on the poor. And it kind of stands to reason. I mean, there's some really obvious things, such as reforestation will reduce the amount of flooding in rural villages. And, the example of Pakistan is, really with us, where a huge amount of deforestation has led to landslips and huge flooding. And this report's really interesting. It's on our Celsius website, which is celsias.co.nz. And the report goes into it's really interesting that it's got a ton of really good examples of how greening the economy can actually stimulate economic growth and have a really dramatic effect on the poor. Some quite nice examples, like in Costa Rica, where there was horrible deforestation. Reforestation and the creation of national parks has created a really strong ecotourism business, because Costa Rica, of course, is very closely aligned with the States, and so they get a huge amount of Californians and other Americans visiting that place. And now, rather than being an agrarian, or necessarily an agrarian and a deforesting kind of country, they have a real incentive to maintain those rainforests.
Has this been made possible through carbon trading?
Yes, it has in part, where countries are able to invest in clean tech or in forestry and able to issue carbon credits to a world market to offset the cost of actually investing in those things. So, for instance, planting a forest is expensive, and it has a short-term effect in that it reduces agricultural land. So the carbon credits do have a softening effect. It's not entirely justified on that basis, but it does provide some short-term incentive. But
essentially it gets down to paying the local people not to cut down the trees.
Yeah, exactly, because they are living hand to mouth, and so they will do everything they can to feed their children tomorrow, which is perfectly understandable, and we will do the same. We often do the same, but we did, didn't we, when we ripped the guts out of New Zealand forests to turn them into, and we're still doing that now with dairy. In the long term, we obviously have a major issue in that our carbon sinks are disappearing, habitats are disappearing, and so people need an incentive to preserve their natural habitat in a way that provides them with an income.
All right. Well, so if people want to check out that report, it is up at celsius.co.nz. The other thing we're talking about today is how the Israelites actually did part the Red Sea.
Well, this is a strange one. I was just I'm a big fan of the Wired website, and this is wired.com, and they often have sort of weird stories from the edge, and are you familiar with the story of the Hebrews exiting from Egypt and Moses parting the Red Sea?
Good old Moses.
And as they went through, the sea came back and drowned all the Egyptian army. And it's interesting that years ago, and has now been confirmed by modelling, of weather systems, there's a part not so much in the Red Sea, but further north and west in the Nile Delta, where if the winds blow strong enough, they actually push the sea right back and create dry land.
Wow.
It only exists for a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
And the thinking was, if that event did actually happen, then that's probably how it did. That the winds blew, the sea parted, the people crossed, and then it came crashing back just in time to catch those nasty Egyptians.
The timing was immaculate.
Yeah. So that's on the Wired website.
Has it ever been witnessed to happen? In modern times.
In the 1930s, a British gentleman explorer was in Egypt, and he noticed that at this particular place there were people sort of frolicking in the sand for an hour or so while the sea disappeared, and then it came back again.
While there was a gale blowing.
Yeah, and he speculated that that's possibly where they crossed.
Yeah.
If indeed they did.
Well, it's really interesting. There's a video of that as well up at wire.com. Search for Red Sea parting. Vincent, thanks so much.
A pleasure, Wammo.
Vincent Heeringa, you can find him at IDlog, also Good Magazine, as we're talking about celsius.co.nz as well.